All right. Good morning. Hopefully morning, at least here on the West Coast in the United States. My name is Tessa Keogh, and this is our Americas and Europe monthly hangout. I wanted to mention four real quick things, and then we're going to open it up to the group that we have in the room today. One of the things I wanted to mention was the Guild at Who Do You Think You Are Live, and we have at least two people who attended who could speak a little bit to it. But the good news was we signed up 56 members at Who Do You Think You Are Live. And I really think from everything that I've heard that it was a combination of having a really well-manned and womaned booth. There were plenty of volunteers who worked the booth, and it was a large booth the entire time. And so on behalf of the Guild, I would like to thank them. We also had some Guild members who spoke. They were presenters. I know of three, and that would be Morris Gleason, Debbie Kinnett, and Julie Goucher. And they spoke on DNA, surnames, and European ancestors. So there was a wide variety. And then the Guild was really clever because we had a little bit of our marketing material that we put on each of the chairs. So that was good. The other thing was the huge number of Guild members who worked the experts table, and some of them planned to work for about an hour and ended up working half a day or an entire day. But they were able to help the individuals, and my understanding of this is you basically come in off the street, you have a question, they assign you to an expert who might be in your area. Say you wanted to know about German research or Barbados research, and that person helps you for a certain period of time. I want to say 15 or 20 minutes. We also, I understand from two of the people who worked that, we're also providing some Guild information. So we're really getting our name out there, which is great. In February, and Hillary, you were there as well, I attended and also presented at the Roots Tech Conference, and I presented on an introduction to one-name studies. And we got a real good buzz from that as well. I heard from a number of people. There were also some other people there. Paul Howes attended, and my understanding is he went to Society Day with me for FGS, and that pushed him back in the direction of getting involved in the committee, and what he didn't know is that he was going to be nominated to be the chair. And so that, I want to say that little morning of where they said how important it was for members of the various societies and groups to get involved and volunteered. I'd like to thank the FGS because they should Paul into doing that. He's probably pulling out his hair. Darius Williams, who happens to work for Family Search, he is also a member of the Guild, and he was so incredibly helpful to the Guild members who were there, introducing us to other people at Family Search and helping me get my room set up and the rest of it. So it was really nice to have so many of those individuals. Helen Smith was there, and she presented as well. And of course, I have in my notes, Hillary attended, and then she joined later. I guess she was really encouraged by the people at Who Do You Think You Are Live. The Guild conference that we had in, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, was at the end of March, that was live streamed, yet again, Bob doing double and triple duty, but was live streamed and it was also recorded. I think is a really helpful thing that we're doing because, because we're giving people, I think, and our members as well as the general public, a lot of added value. They're able to watch presentations, get a sense of what we do, who we are, and see kind of the nuts and bolts about how people are approaching their studies. And I think the best news there is that you learn that there are so many different ways to approach it. There's not one cut and dried or, little steps that you have to go through. You can approach it however you want. A couple other things that I wanted to mention is, thank you everyone who volunteered for committees, who stayed on in their posts or took on a new post. And thanks to the people who did this work for years and have now taken a step back as well. I think the committee seems to be really off and running, and one of those reasons is because a number of people have helped with the transition, and that's always important when you turn things over to new people. Website, excellent. Improvements every day. If you haven't gone on in a while, go on. Nigel and his team continue to add things, so it's great. The most recent one was the forum move. It's really nice to have the forum, what was known as the bulletin board, right there in the dashboard. And finally, this is a little teaser before we open it up to everyone. The Guild USA is going to be I would say co-hosting, but we're actually hosting the seminar that's going to be at the end of September in Boston, and it's going to be at the New England Historic and Genealogical Society. And in fact, we will be working with them to put on this 2-day seminar. A portion of it is going to be about one name studies, and a portion of it is going to be about the record sets that you'd be using either on their website, which is americanancestors.org, or at their facility, which is supposedly, I haven't been there yet, but I'll be there in September, an absolutely gorgeous facility. We're working out just the final items about how we're setting it up, so there's going to be more news within the next 15 to 30 days, but it is going to be late September, which is a great time to visit Boston. And the lead on this is Bob Young. He's a Guild member, and he previously was a regional rep for the Northeast region. And he just happened to be there and chatted them up, and this kind of took off from there. And for his sins, so to speak, he gets to be the lead. so he has been putting together all of the aspects of it, and we've gotten a little help from the subcommittee, if that's right, and we'll have all the information to the USA members. What we're going to try and do from here on out is have a seminar every year somewhere, like, perhaps the next one might be in Washington, D.C., or Salt Lake City, or, there's a number of other places we could host them, co-host them, but we want to have it at some place where there's a facility that you could also use records, and just have a real tight 2-day seminar. So that's the news that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and just open this up. I would love to hear from Bob and Hillary and anyone else who might have attended. Who do you think you are live? And Hillary can also give us a comparison with Roots Tech. Let's go ahead. You're going to have to unmute yourselves. Great.
Hillary, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I have actually done something about a comparison for Roots Tech and Who Do You Think You Are Live, because I've actually done a blog post on it. I think I posted something up, and I think you've seen it, haven't you, Tessa? And I think yes. One or two some other people may have seen it. Because I felt that the main difference I found as an attendee was that I found Roots Tech was better from a point of view of networking. Now, whether it was just because I happened to know more people that when I went to Roots Tech prior to going to Roots Tech than I did at Who Do You Think You Are Live, I'm not sure, but it certainly seemed to be a better event in terms of networking. But I was there for quite a few days, whereas I only went to one day at Who Do You Think You Are Live, so maybe if I'd attended all 3 days, I'd have had more of a chance to network with other people. So that's just my own opinion anyway.
And I believe that Roots Tech, the thing that made the difference for me, it was the first time I went, but Jill Ball, for instance, and I believe she's a member of the Guild as well, she got everybody together, or the people that wanted to get together, the evening before. And I know Dick Eastman always has a kind of an open dinner, where everybody comes to it and chats up each other. And so there seemed to be, they've had that practice of a couple of years now of having those kinds of events at different times. And I think that might be something. I know Debbie Kinnett had put something together for people who were going to be talking about DNA or whatever, but a lot of times those things kind of come up organically, and in Roots Tech they've really gotten them organized, and so maybe that might be something to think about next year, since they know where it's going to be again.
Shall I just chip in here, because I was at Who Do You Think You Are Live as well, and I've normally gone on all 3 days for the last, I don't know how many years now. But we've actually got quite a nice little DNA community, and we always meet up at Who Do You Think You Are Live. But it seems to be mostly in the evenings when that networking takes place. There's very, very little time in the day, especially when people are helping on stands and they're giving talks. And normally it's just been so busy on the DNA stands in particular. We've, not so much this year, but in previous years, we've just been worked off our feet, and it's just been talking to people non-stop all day long. So there's not really a great deal of time during the course of the day to do that sort of thing. I think it would be nice to have that opportunity to get together. I never have enough chance to get together with all the genealogy people at Who Do You Think You Are Live, because I'm always talking to the DNA people instead. But I think probably, I mean, things like the Guild seminar, the Guild conference is a much better place for networking, I've found, and you do have the time there to chat to people.
Okay, so apologies to Ed and to Hilary. We kind of discussed some of this morning, but an update for you on Who Do You Think You Are. For those of you, and I think that's at least half of you that are outside the UK, this year's dilemma for Who Do You Think You Are, which used to be the world's biggest genealogy show until America woke up. The dilemma this year was that the conference location and date were changed. I think it's for the last 2 years, the conference has run Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, whereas previously it used to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So this year it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday event, but based at the NEC, which is a massive conference centre in the heart of England at Birmingham. So the view was, don't really know if it's going to be a success. A, because of the venue, and partially because of the days that the conference was on. The view, though, was that folks would more likely have a day trip to Birmingham. So if you can imagine Birmingham being roughly around the middle of England, the centre of England, it's relatively easy to get to Birmingham on a train, spend the day at Who Do You Think You Are, and then pop off home in the evening. And I think a lot of attendees probably attended the show that way. The folks that were involved in the organisation did tend to spend 2, if not 3 days there. And as Debbie alludes, the only time to really chat and catch up on stuff was in the evening. You know, that said, Birmingham's a big place, and I think we were all spread across a number of hotels. But nonetheless, the view was, and I spoke to quite a few guild members who serve as officers in family history societies, so they quite often man the stands. Their view was there was a steady amount of traffic in terms of visitors to the stand across the 3 days. So whereas in London, visitors might, for example, come down, spend a day sightseeing, and then maybe spend a day at the show, or maybe 2 half days, or whichever. But some people did go to London and spend a night in a room, for example. I'm not sure if the attendees for Birmingham did the same, but nonetheless, the aisles between the stands were maybe twice as large as in London. So it didn't quite feel so busy in terms of there being, congestion around the aisles. But nonetheless, as Tessa said, across the 3 days we had 56 new members. I think it was 19 on day 1, 21 on day 2, and the balance, which I think is 16 on day 3, and 5 subsequently who signed up citing Who Do You Think You Are as the reason for joining, with a total of something like, I think she said 96 people joining. Yeah, April, 96 members joining, and across Who Do You Think You Are, of the 56 or 61 or so that joined, we've got 37 new studies. Just to sort of amplify what Tessa's already said, there's kind of 3 ways the Guild gets involved. There's those that volunteer for the stand, and they tend to be arranged in front of the stand and welcome visitors to the stand, engage them in conversations, do surname lookups on surname atlas, and help them to understand where a surname's come from. Also encouraging potential members to join. Another area of expertise is where Guild members, and it's around about, Tessa, 25% of all the educational talks are given by Guild members. Not necessarily on behalf of the Guild, but their own respective specialities. And the other areas Tessa has mentioned is Ask the Experts, and there's about 5, 6, 7 of us that do rotations to help visitors to the show, and the range of questions can be from the novice to the beginner, asking how do I get started, or I'm stuck here, where do I go next, right to the more sophisticated or difficult question like, how do I tell my John Smith from all the other John Smiths, for example? And we're getting much more of those, let's say, difficult, sticky questions. Or, for example, one family were looking for a family that seems to have vanished off the face of the earth after the 1881 census, and we're able to track them down for that family. So it's those three areas: the stand, giving presentations, educational talks, and ask the experts, which is, as Tessa said, a kind of 20-minute clinic. They do encourage folks to approach the Society of Genealogists, ask what their questions are, bring materials with them along to the show, and they'll try and pre-allocate the 20-minute slot when a person with that particular expertise just happens to be on duty. And the credit to Guild of One Name Studies members, we tend to be very adept at helping folks because of the way we use record sources. If you can imagine, I don't know, let's say a baptism register per se, if you're doing your own family tree, you might only hit one baptism register for one particular church at one particular time, whereas we're trying to get all the folks called such and such out of a baptism register. So over the course of a number of years, you learn to detect some of the things that might go wrong with that search strategy, or some of the things that might go wrong with the records themselves.
Can I just add to what you've said, Bob? In addition to the areas you've mentioned, we had Guild members this year at Who Do You Think You Are Live organising the DNA workshop. That was done by Maurice Gleeson and I, also working on the ISOG stand, and there are also a lot of Guild members who hold positions in family history societies who were there in their capacity of working for their society. And also with regards to the traffic, one thing that a lot of us commented on was that it seemed very, very busy in the mornings, and then by about 3 o'clock it all started to die off. And what I was told was that there are apparently lots of coaches that come up for the day, and then the coaches have to leave quite early so that they avoid all the rush hour traffic, because there did seem to be a noticeable lull in the sort of early afternoon to late afternoon, whereas we didn't get that in London at all. It was a steady stream of traffic all day long on all 3 days.
I would say that probably would have been nice to have a short break from what I heard some people saying, that they didn't get a chance to get away from the moment they got there in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon. That could be, they didn't have lunch or whatever else. But, it's a real credit to how you all have set this up. And I realize in the UK you've done it for a number of years now, but to have that many volunteers, to have people sign up for the times, and show up. I will say I had been told that Roots Tech was probably not a great place to have a booth or a table. They thought, especially this year, because it was combined with FGS, that we'd be one of the small players there and just be overwhelmed. And so I decided to just go with doing the presentation and having the materials available, which I was fine because it was the first time I was presenting there. But I would definitely say that next year the Guild is going to be at Roots Tech, because I thought the numbers of people who were coming in, certainly the first 2 days of it. There's one day of Roots Tech where it's open to the youth, and I think they use that for their numbers as well. It's Family Day and Youth Day, but it's really geared more to the LDS, how they're using their family history and the new things that are going on there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I noticed on that day it was just packed with people who really were just finding out about genealogy or what they should be doing to work on their mission, as opposed to the genealogists who were there the first 2 days and were there because they've been doing genealogy for years. They're professional genealogists, or they're genealogists who finally come down to Salt Lake City to do some research at the Family History Library. So that was the one kind of, I would say, oddnick day, for want of a better word. But other than that, there was a steady stream of people, and although I think they could lay out the exhibit hall better, I don't know what you thought, Hillary, I thought that a lot of the smaller tables were way in the back. I missed a whole section because I wasn't aware it was there. They had all the big players in the front, and I had made the suggestion that they might want to think about putting those big players at the four corners, you know, and having that, because they have doors for all of those areas, but really focus there so it's more spread out. You tended to get that front section that was incredibly noisy because all four of the big players were doing presentations all the time. So I don't know how it was laid out for all of you, but I think that Roots Tech and FGS would be best served by having a little bit more focus on the societies, and it appears that Who Do You Think You Are really does that.
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree, Tessa.
Okay.
It's with these things, the big attendees with the big booths are the guys that pay the most money in terms of helping to sponsor the events. So they quite often look to secure the prime entrance and exit, the main entrance in and out of the hall. One of the criticisms that you do hear, regardless of whether Who Do You Think You Are is based in London or Birmingham, is that the cost of a table, I don't know, let's assume it's about £1,000 a day. Most family history societies just can't afford that, and if they do, they find that they have to sell so much material that they just about break even for the show. So unfortunately, quite a few of the family history societies don't turn up. You do see some of the larger ones grouped together, and maybe 3 regional family history societies will rent a table collectively. But the notion of the prime sponsors in terms of helping to offset some of the costs moving to, let's say, non-prime locations, I don't think is likely to fly with those guys.
Oh, I don't think that would fly at all. I agree with you, but I do think you could make each of those corners prime spots. You know, and if you had this special door there each day, you know, or that type of thing, that's where it opened. I don't know. There just seemed like, and I don't know how you do it, and this is not my field at all, but I found it very difficult when I was in those prime spots because I have really good hearing, and I could hear from every single area. So as a result, you just wanted to get out of there. I didn't find myself spending time at those prime spots because of how noisy it was. What did you think, Hilary?
I don't think I looked at anything on Ancestry, Family Search. I barely looked at. Find My Past is one of the other big ones. No, I actually aimed for some of the smaller ones around the edge and at the back more in Roots Tech. And before I went to Who Do You Think You Are Live, I had a sort of rough idea of where I was aiming for as well. And I do tend to avoid the Ancestry and head for the smaller ones, because often they're the places where you're going to get the contact with people that might be able to help you with something that you're stuck on. If the local family history societies are there, then they're often the ones that have got somebody there that knows a bit about that area. I quite often, as you say, the others are very busy. I think when I went to Who Do You Think You Are Live in London, I went to one of the talks on one of the stands that was a separate one, which I think may have been Find My Past or something that one of the experts was doing. But this year, partially because I didn't have the time, because I'd organised to go to talks anyway, which was most of the day. But I just headed for the family history societies that I was aiming for, and went there. And I don't know what other people tend to do, but they are all too much together, and you can't really. And you're fighting to get on there anyway, because everybody that's new beginners all seem to head for those big ones anyway.
I thought there was too much going on at once at Who Do You Think You Are Live. There were too many talks, and in fact some of the talks, when I walked around lunchtime on the Saturday, and there was one poor lady talking about, I think it was Norwegian genealogy, in a big theatre that could take about 100 people, and there are only about 20 people in there. And there were quite a few talks that weren't particularly well attended, and I think they could have cut it down and had perhaps just 2 or 3 streams, rather than we had 4 streams of talks plus the DNA talks, and then you had individual stands that also had their own talks as well, like Ancestry, the Genealogist, and Find My Past. And it was just too much going on at once. And it's also quite a contrast. I noticed when I went to a conference in Canada, the Befisco conference, they had like a keynote speech at the beginning and the end of the conference, and everyone went to that. And then you didn't have all the stands selling things while those were going on. It was just the whole conference went along. So you had much more of a sense of everyone being part of it. Whereas when with all the stands, people working on stands, those people couldn't actually get to many of the talks anyway, which I think is a shame, because that's, in some ways, that's the most interesting part of going to the conference.
And the thing that I noticed with Roots Tech was also they did have keynotes each day. I probably would have had a keynote the first day and something, you know, something to open and something to close. It probably would have been sufficient. But they did have something for everyone each day at those, and you just saw the enormity of how many people were there. So that was one thing. I do think that they should close the exhibit hall, and the exhibitors would probably have a heart attack me saying this, but you were really being pushed and pulled in all of the different directions. I want to say at Roots Tech, because they combined it with FGS, they might have had 7 or 9 streams going on all the time. And I agree with you. There was someone at FGS, and I went over to hear the talk, and there were 20 people in the room. And presenting, as Debbie I'm sure can say, you know, we have to turn in our outline, we have to have our slides together, you know, it's a lot of work to put that together, and then if you're going to have handouts the day of the show and the rest of it, and so you do all of this work, and then there's 20 people in the room, and that's great for those 20 people, but I thought it was a real, since they're not recording it, they really lost out on people learning about that subject, and of course, no one will sit together. So the 20 people were spread out in this area for 400 people in all the corners. And she had a mic, but there was still a little yelling going on. People didn't see the PowerPoint as well or whatever. I think we all have that problem of not wanting to sit in the front. Debbie, one item, you mentioned something in Canada, and you also mentioned another group. And when you use the initials, some of us who live in the United States don't know what you're talking about. So if you could just tell us, what was the Canada?
In September last year, I was invited to speak at the BIFISGO conference, and that stands for the British Isles Family History Society of Greater Ottawa.
Okay.
And that was actually an interesting experience. It was a 3-day conference, but it was very different from any conference that I've been to over here. They had 3 parallel streams of talks, but in there it was the talks that was the central focus of the event rather than all the stands. So the stands were like, it was more like a guild conference where the talks are the main focus, and you do have a few little tables where people are selling things. But it was a very, very nice conference, and lovely people I met over there. And I gave, I think it was 4 talks, which was actually quite hard going, and then I had a little stand for ISOG, and I was selling DNA kits on the stand, and I sold about 40 kits while I was there.
ISOG is what?
ISOG is the International Society of Genetic Genealogy.
Great. So I think I caught the ones that I wasn't aware of.
I'm just answering lots of DNA questions for people and just offering advice on DNA testing.
So I guess a question that comes up is, what do people want in a conference or a seminar? Because we're finalizing the first Guild USA seminar, and we're planning over the 2 days to have 4 presentations, and there'll be 2 in the morning each day, and have the afternoon open to using the actual facility, as well as private consultations with the experts who are at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. So if you know specifically what you have in mind, you can send them your information in advance, and they'll be prepared when you have your consultation to chat with them about it.
That's
go ahead.
Sorry, that's what I was going to say, is that's what they do at Jamboree. In fact, I just received Jamboree, for those of you who don't know, is a big annual conference, 3-day conference. That's, in fact, it's actually 4 days, because the first day is Thursday, which is DNA Day, and then the conference starts, the conference as a whole, put on by the Southern California Genealogical Society, starts Friday and runs till Sunday. And what they do is, I just received my email the other day, they have you fill out a questionnaire which classes do you want to go to, and all that, kind of information, so that they know what size rooms to schedule for different speakers. And if people don't fill those out, you can get a big disparity, like you're saying, somebody in a big room with just a few people there. Because this is held at Marriott Hotel, and they have a lot of different size rooms. So, they try to schedule people. Like, I know last year when I was there, I went for the whole conference last year, and they put Judy Russell in a smaller room, and it was filled within, it was filled before the time of the presentation, so nobody could get in. It was a real shame. So, they tell people, please fill those forms out, because otherwise they have no way of knowing who's going to be. And what you were saying about the hall, with the stands and everything, Tessa, I absolutely agree, because the main vendor hall there is not that big, at least when I went last year. And I don't know if they're going to change it or if it's always the same, because this is the 15th annual conference. So it's not that big, the main hall, and all the big ones, like you say, are at the front, with a couple of other smaller ones. I don't know how they work that out, and they were doing things, like you say, giving talks and everything, and it was so noisy in one part of the room that it was worthless to me to be there. The only reason I was in there was two things. I was helping out at ISOG table, and I was also, and we already know who ISOG is, right? And the other thing was, I was nagging the Ancestry people to give me free kits for our DNA group, my genealogy society, so we could have them for door prizes. And I kept going back and saying, is anybody here that can give me free kits? And they thought I was going to go away, I'm sure, but I didn't. But the nice thing about Jamboree is, from one point of view, is that they have stands in the halls, and you have quite long halls. You can imagine, because it's two different buildings, and so you've got a lot of walking to do in between. So there's a lot of stands along the hallways that are also busy, and people can just stop by, the smaller groups and things like that, and it makes it kind of nice, because you can just stop and talk as you walk along, and there's a lot of networking that goes on there too, because they have couches and everything in the hallways and different places. So it has a lot to do with the venue, I would imagine. From hearing what you're saying, everybody has the same problems, but how they're attacked is dependent on, the space that you're in a lot, I think.
And I would say that at Roots Tech, they use the Salt Palace, I think is what the name of their convention center is. So once I found out, I think it was the second day, I'd been taking the long way each day. That must be both my Catholic school training and growing up in the city that you walk those blocks. But I was following the rules for what they had, the instructions, and then someone pointed out that if you took this back escalator, you could avoid this whole area and get right to where you wanted. So I thought, oh, there are 4 doors at this convention center. They could make each of those feeding areas, feed the group in a big spot. And I would think I would really have the question for Family Search and Ancestry, and I think the other one was My Heritage that was big, and then Find My Past. If they had that door be the big door, the one day or whatever, and then just traded it around, or they knew that you could get in those each way depending on what you were interested in, I think they would get more people who were focused on that particular group than trying to get through that large group. And I noticed that most people who were going to Ancestry and My Heritage were going to pick up the freebie.
Yep.
Most people picked up the freebie and kept walking. And some of the freebies were great, and that's, people wanted that orange bag or whatever. But it hit me that they weren't really, there were very few people. They also wanted to use the computers. So those tended to be the two big things, and these people had the internet access and the computers, that I would think you'd actually do better by having your focused group there and having the time to chat with those people and having an area for the freebies that you just let them keep walking. It almost gave me a headache because, like I said, my hearing is so good that I was hearing 2 or 3 conversations.
I'm the same way.
And so I could not focus on the presentation because they were being drowned out. Now, that said, they did an amazing job setting it up. I was there the night before and thought, how are they going to get this together? And those people are definitely professionals in each of these groups. Family Search did a beautiful job with their demo center. Very entertaining, and I in fact had gone to the keynote and then had to tweak my talk because they introduced in their demo center that they're looking at surnames and given names. What does your name mean, where is it from? And I thought, what? so I had to throw that in or whatever. But there so many of these people are moving in this area. When I was giving my talk, I was saying there's a lot online to get you started, and this is one of those basic things we should want to know about, and most people were interested. One thing I want to point out before I go ahead and open it back up again for conversation is I will be sending out in the next couple of weeks to all of the USA members the 7 Pillars book as well as the Guild badge. I think, Kathleen, you had gotten the badge earlier, or maybe the books earlier, but we made arrangements to have them for every single one of our members so that you'll have those, and then we're going to start having really focused presentations of 15 or 20 minutes that are going to go on to the YouTube channel talking about various aspects of One Name Studies and getting some people who are Guild members to speak to particular record sets that they know about, whether we're talking about American records in different states or we're asking some people to tell us something about Australia or the UK or Ireland or what have you. So we want all of our Guild members, and a number have asked about this, to have that book because it's very useful to have that as well as to be looking online or going to our Guild wiki for that. So on that note, any other conversations?
Tessa, is the 7 Pillars book available as a PDF?
It is available as a PDF, but they have not finished something up with it, and so I'm going to make sure that that's also available. They wanted to put it on a jump drive for, I think that's what they call them, flash drives for members, and that would be something that we would have.
Because I know that Michelle, when she just joined, was trying to find out where to get that book, especially as a PDF.
And she is on my list to send out. I have 237 to send out right now, so the labeling process continues. The postman's very happy.
Okay, I'll tell her. Okay. By the way, I've been a member of the NEHGS, where you're going to be having that seminar now for almost 25 years. It is a fabulous place to go, and it's for those of you in the UK, this would be an excellent time to get an introduction to New England records at the premier place to do that. It's a marvelous library, and it's the oldest genealogical society in the country.
Everyone's very quiet.
Oh, well, I'll go again. I was just going to mention that the discussion about having expert tables and that kind of thing. I worked last year at Jamboree at the DNA roundtables, they call it, where you have people come and ask questions, and they more or less split it up so that you have Y-DNA at one table and autosomal at another table, and people would just come and ask questions. And I'm doing that again this year, and I have to say it is the most fun. Talking about, you say, oh yes, I'll come in and sit for an hour or so. You stay the whole time. you can sit there and talk to people, and it's just wonderful helping people that are new and have questions and are, you help them avoid some pitfalls and, get a little further. It's just a really great opportunity to influence and, help people. It's really worthwhile. And then I noticed at Jamboree this year they're also having the and I think they had it last year. I just didn't pay too much attention to it. The expert tables where you can write in ahead of time and say, you want a space to talk to somebody about a certain subject. So I think those are really good things. And if the Guild is going to have a presence at, some of the conferences, that would be something to really try and get in there.
Yes, this year we had a little difficulty just because of the various things that have gone on, and certainly in the United States, everything is done at least a year in advance. So we kind of did some of the seed work last year as far as being able to get some presentations or the rest, and of course my nephew is getting married over the Jamboree weekend. He didn't contact me first, so that was a problem, but we're definitely planning on Roots Tech, Jamboree, and then probably one other, and it'll just depend on what our members think is the best one, whether that's FGS or NGS, because I was really impressed with the number of people who, when they saw my badge, and we got everybody in the Guild to wear their badges. Paul talked to a number of people. Paul and I worked the FGS table for about 3 hours on Saturday there. I think when people are aware of it, they're very interested, or they get it. People who came to my presentation said, "Oh, I see why even if you didn't do a global study." John, could you do me a favor and mute yourself? So if you're not doing even a global study at that point, just finding out, and that's what I encourage people, find out what the surnames mean with your direct line, the 8 or the 12 or 16 that you work with, and it's easier to do now, and it'll kind of give you a start. And I had a number of people get back to me afterwards and say that they were very interested to find out what their names meant, certainly if they were foreign names. So one other question I have, has anyone ever done anything, this is very prevalent in law and medicine and the social sciences, the poster tables where you have a 30-minute ability to have, you almost have these posters that are made up, that are large, that are behind you about a particular study or about a product, and then there's like 5 of them at a time at a conference, and you have that 30 minutes to talk and answer questions. And so it's shorter than doing a full-fledged presentation, and that information is up there all the time. So it's kind of a combination of being an exhibitor but having something to say, and people know specifically when you're going to be giving your general spiel, so to speak.
We have had poster displays at the seminars in the past, but we've never ever had the opportunity for people to stand by their display and answer questions. And the problem I've always found when I've gone to a seminar, I've never even had time to go and even look at the displays because I'm so busy going to the talks, or I'm busy chatting to people. Right. But I think that would be an interesting idea to actually do that.
Right. And the way they have it set up both in law and the social science ones that I've attended is, from 9 to 9:30, these 4 presentations are being given. The board is up there all the time. You send that in early, but the board's always up there. Some of the written information is up there, and contact, but they're at their table. So you can go to one of those 4, and then there's 4 more in the afternoon. So it's right at the start and right after lunch type of thing. And then and they don't have presentations going on during that time. The exhibit hall is open, so you know that you're going to at least be able to find out the particular information. I found when I went through the exhibit hall, I was spending time with the people who were sitting at their table and working it, either showing me something, but I also thought to myself, he's done this talk about what I was interested in probably about 100 times today. How much nicer would it have been for him to give a presentation, and then it's kind of recorded and you can just hit the button to hear it afterwards. And then they're answering other questions, but that basic information is there.
Yes, just to go back to Who Do You Think You Are Live, one thing that we did, certainly with the DNA talks, Maurice was able to record all the talks. So those are now up on a dedicated YouTube channel. If you just do a Google search, DNA lectures, Who Do You Think You Are Live, you will find most of those talks there. So that also solved the problem where we had some talks that were actually poorly attended late in the day. And the fact that those talks are now accessible on YouTube, it means that those people can reach a much wider audience. And some of the talks, one of the talks I did on autosomal DNA has now already had over 1,000 views. Mm-hmm. So although at the venue that we had seating, probably only had room for about 50, 60 people at most, it's enabled me to reach a much wider audience by having those talks recorded. But it's always going to be a sort of difficult decision, because if you record talks, is that going to deter people from attending in person? But I think the two actually feed off each other, because people still want to actually be there in person, and they want to have the chance to ask questions. But I think just having things available also generates interest in events and in the subjects as well. I don't know if Bob has got any thoughts on that aspect of it.
Yeah, I completely agree, Debbie. In terms of drawing folks, let's say, out of home to come along to attend one of these things, there's been some research that's been conducted both here in the UK and in the US around American football in the US and soccer over here. The idea is, if you broadcast a football or a soccer event live, will people stay at home and watch it? And the answer is, it's not as simple as broadcasting live results in people not turning up. I think it's about 5% of the audience that's at risk with that approach. What has a bigger draw on the audience, as Debbie says, is being able to interact with the speakers. If the topic is quite dull or of low interest, for example, then folks won't attend and would like to see the thing either live from home whilst they can, or subsequently. So the example that was used over here in the research was our local derby. Two teams from a local area tend to draw out the local crowd. Broadcasting that type of event live actually sort of doubles the crowd attendance rather than threatens to undermine it as such. So I completely agree with Debbie. I mean, we do need to make sure that the venues we choose are readily accessible. The topics we choose to have seminars and presentations on are interesting, and the speakers that deliver them are engaging. And I think if you do all three of those, you're almost certain to have attendance. If you start to dabble, let's say, or get that mixture wrong, then you do potentially threaten audiences with attendance.
Mm. Yes, I find it's actually quite an art choosing speakers. Having helped to organise this DNA workshop, we had to take chances with some speakers where we hadn't actually heard them speak, and some worked out better than others. But that's just one of the things, because it's just impossible to listen to everyone in advance. So it takes time to learn who you can trust as a speaker and who you can't.
And then I will also say, and I think Roots Tech does an excellent job with this, they are willing to take those chances. They make sure that about 20% of their speakers are relatively new. Mm-hmm. And so they're always injecting new blood, so to speak, which I found really good. I'd like to know Hillary's opinion. I went to a few talks where I knew who the speaker was, and I was expecting, to be wowed. And I thought, this is the same thing I've heard before. They haven't switched out one slide. In fact, I will say, I attended a 2-day conference with someone who hadn't switched out a slide in about 10 years, and it was obvious. And so sometimes the name, how to say this in a nice way, they're kind of coasting on the name or the fact that they've been doing it for a while. And I do think it's important, and maybe it's a good reason why certain things are being recorded now, because you'll go in and change it up a bit. I just finished, because I had switched out my recording program, recording the presentation that I did for Roots Tech, and so that's going to be on my YouTube channel later this afternoon or tomorrow. And I'm also putting my handout up there as a PDF, because my view of it is, if I were to give this talk again, there's going to be other websites. There's going to be something more to do. You take it beyond that. It's not static. And I think that I'm sure that it's hard to choose those speakers. I have no doubt about that, but I definitely think it's going to recording and having these things more available so that we can see new speakers is a really good idea, because I think it's going to make everyone freshen up their work, certainly if they've had it there for a while.
I agree entirely, Tessa. I've run into this particularly with speakers, and some of them who withhold giving us permission to share talks. Some of them claim that they earn a living or make money out of delivering these talks. Now, I become suspicious that they must be recycling the same talk again and again and again and again, and therefore don't want to share that talk, because the other half of me says, well, if you make your talk available, if the audience like what you're saying and how you deliver it, they're more likely to come out and see you live next time. If you are just going to re-deliver the same slides, then so be it. I think once you've heard a speaker speak, you're less likely to go back to their talk if you suspect they're going to replay what they've previously said.
It's one difficulty with regards to copyright, and I know this is something that comes up. A lot of speakers, if it's just an informal gathering, they may just collect a few sort of cartoons or odd bits and pieces from the internet, and that, if you're just broadcasting to a little room of people, of 50 people, then that's probably okay, although technically it probably isn't. But if you're then sharing your video and it's going out on YouTube for all to see, you are then putting yourself at risk if you've included those things without getting the prior approval. And the other thing that I found also is sometimes I remember we had the Amersham seminar, where a lot of the talks are actually on living people and accessing information about living people, and that actually made it difficult to share those talks in a more public forum. So those are probably the two, I think those are the two areas which are of most concern, but otherwise I don't see any reason why people shouldn't share their talks more widely.
Kathleen, did you want to?
No, I'm just saying I agree with all this, because I have the job of scheduling speakers just for our local society for the DNA group, and it's not easy. And when you do get one, we're fortunate enough to have Cece Moore, local. She's locally available, so and she helped to form our society anyway. So she, does a lot. I mean, she's such a what's the word I want?
She is dynamic.
Yeah, she's a requested speaker everywhere, and she will often tailor what she's, to the crowd, and she'll change things midway. She'll do a couple months ago, she did 2 presentations in one evening meeting, which was really something to see. But and then we have other speakers. We bring people in from out of town, and I try to find something on YouTube and get a feel for how they present, and if that's going to be likable to our group. We had Tim Jansen come and gave a presentation, and he is absolutely wonderful, but he's over the head for a lot of our group, and they enjoyed it very much, but they don't get as much out of that. The majority of the group doesn't. So there's so many things you have to weigh.
And I think that's really important what you just said. When I ask people, if somebody, even with Roots Tech, I said, do we know who's coming? Do we have any idea if these people, because they tell you, is this for beginners, intermediate, advanced, or whatever, and you want to say, first of all, what does that mean to you? It might mean something different to me than it does to you, but are they just sitting in here because this was the only room open, or are they actually interested in it? I mean, there's a lot of things that enter into any of these conferences or seminars. And I will say, I attended one where the person clearly, after 3 minutes, could have realized that this was a general genealogy club or society, and he was talking so far over their head, and he spent the entire day talking over everyone's head and making kind of snide comments if you asked what he considered a dumb question. I felt like I was back in my college days of not opening my mouth and keeping my head down, and I thought, I would never go hear this person speak again. And I do think as a speaker, you have to go down and meet the audience beforehand. You have to kind of get a feel, and if it's not working, you have to say, what do you guys want to learn about? I do think on some of these things, people are so keyed into their PowerPoint or so keyed into what they said they were going to talk about that it's not all that comfortable to pivot, and we need to get a little bit better about that. But I would also say that the people who organize this have to give us a sense, and that's why I think it's great that Jamboree has a questionnaire. What do you want to learn about? Where are you going to be going, to get a feel for their audience? Roots Tech also had a grading system, and some people were really good about filling it out. The unfortunate thing was they closed it down after 4 days. And so I was out of town, I had to fly back, I had to get back to real life, and then I went on to do my grading, and it was already closed. And so that's another thing that would be helpful to leave open for a bit, or to give out a freebie if you do fill it out. So, really give honest appraisals. It's very helpful to the presenter.
Yes.
Well, that's something I've never ever had. I've never been anywhere where I've spoken where I've had any feedback from the audience, sort of after the event, to say whether or not I'd covered the subject they wanted, whether I'd done anything, it was too high level, too low level, or anything else like that.
That's what I like about the Jamboree app, the mobile app they put out, which I just downloaded today, is it has so much information in it. But one of the really great things is that you can do the questionnaire thing right at the end of the presentation, or in fact you can do it part way through if you want to, or you can do the handwritten one. But they always they always ask people to fill them out.
And one thing that would be really good for conferences or seminars would be to say, go ahead and take this 3 minutes while we're finishing up, in case there's any questions, to fill out your app review or whatever else. I almost felt with Roots Tech, they also had that app and it was great, and I know Jamboree introduced it first, but I thought to myself, you didn't have one down minute. At least I didn't feel like I did during that whole 3-day time period. So I didn't have time to do it then, but if you built that into the time, that would be excellent at any of these, because I think it's very helpful to the presenters and helpful to the organizers.
Yes, I always find people want to hand me out bits of paper to give feedback, and I never get time to fill out the paper while I'm there. And then when I get back home, I just can't be bothered because it means going off and posting a letter. None of them seem to have somewhere where you can fill out a form online and provide your feedback online. And I can't understand why that should be. I mean, Who Do You Think You Are Live? They had an app that was only for iPhones. They didn't have an app for Android. So I couldn't use the app, and a lot of people were complaining about that. So I think there's still some way to go before a lot of these events actually enter the 21st century.
They're definitely moving in the right direction, and I know what they do at the legal ones is they have you can fill out the form at a kiosk, so you can work on the tablet. You can also fill it out in paper and turn it in, and then they pull a couple of names out of the hat, so to speak, the next morning, and those people get a prize for having turned in something. It's usually a pretty good one, but it gets people to fill out the reviews, which is I think they always try to use carrots with various groups, and maybe we need to introduce some carrots. But whether it's some books or a software program or anything, there are things that we could do to get people, to push them along in that direction. But I think that would be a really good idea. And I agree with you, Debbie. I hate it when they say, we only have this app for an iPhone. And I'm like, well, the vast majority of people don't have an iPhone.
So I don't know if you're getting feedback for the Guild's seminars on the speakers there. I mean, I suppose we can tell to a certain extent by the views that we get on YouTube and just by the comments that people make during the events and afterwards.
All of the speakers, Debbie, are are rated both at seminars and at conference. The feedback, I can't say is shared effectively with speakers because you've never seen one of yours, for instance.
I've never had any feedback at all from anything that I've done for the guilds. I mean, it would be nice to have that feedback at some point.
Yeah, I can't honestly remember if it's available in the members' room or if it's in the committee area or where, but I do know that it's religiously caught, all the feedback forms, and I think they go towards trying to make general improvements around what I would call the facilities rather than the speakers. You know, that said, if a speaker just puts off an audience entirely, then SEMSUB won't use them again, for instance. If a venue has poor sound, for instance, then they won't use that venue again. You know, that said, a lot of the feedback I've seen, Debbie, is around the quality of the food, particularly if the guild seminar folks are not arranging it. They're extremely particular about this stuff, as you can imagine. But yeah, you do occasionally get, oh, there's not enough detail here in such and such a talk, or didn't understand a word of it.
Yeah.
Which is of limited use to you, because I think of the speakers on this call, I don't suppose many of us would ever repeat the same talk again. And actually, you've got to take it on the chin and say, well, okay, I addressed maybe only half the audience or a quarter of the audience. You just never know what the competency of the audience is going to be.
You know what I just thought of, Bob, when you said that, and when you were talking about the food, and Tessa was talking about the prizes for doing things. And we went to a local historical society not too long ago and had a table there for our society. And the main thing they said they bring every year is a big bowl of chocolate. And let me tell you, we had so many people come to our stand and just to get chocolate, but while they were there, they were looking at all our material and picking brochures up and asking questions. And it's amazing. It's amazing what those little bits of chocolate did.
Brilliant.
We got several new members through that.
Perhaps we should commission some special chocolate in a blue guild wrapper to give out to people. Yes. That would get people going to our stand, wouldn't it?
Well, I think most of the chocolate, Cadbury's, Hershey's, it's got to be surname based anyway, right? So.
That's right.
I love that we could have a little explanation.
Exactly.
We'll have someone doing the Cadbury surname, do we?
Well, I do try to eat that surname occasionally.
All right. Unless we have anything more on conferences, and if you have any other ideas, please go ahead and send us a comment, to the Guild email. You could send it directly to me if you want, because we're really we're working at the beginning of this, but we're also trying to figure out what it is the members want. I got some really good feedback in the survey that I did last year for the members, and so that's why I know the kinds of things that you're interested in learning more about here, at least at our first seminar. Anyone else want to talk about anything else? I haven't been to one of these in a couple of months because I've been out of town, so I've missed John Laws and John Lyle, and I know Kathleen's been at this, but anyone else, just feel free to jump in if you have questions or comments.
Well, you can catch me on Mondays with Mertz anytime.
That's during the workday.
Tessa, you might want to investigate. There's a biannual New England Genealogical Conference, which is very well attended.
NERC or something like that? Yeah, they just had it in Providence, right?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've gotten the information for when it's going to be, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. I think that's a real good one.
And Tessa, something that I'm sure you're aware of, my view about the events in the US, they are planned so far in advance, at least 18 months, in trying to round up some speakers for those. What I have noticed about the talks like Jamboree and NGS and a few others is that there is nearly always a thread on dare I call it, foreign to the US surnames. So there's definitely an interesting thread in many of these agenda topics where they're looking for speakers, for someone to talk about German names or Italian names or surname origins, that kind of thing. And it can be extremely influential, although I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You know, if guild members are talking at the audience about surname origins, for example, some folks can feel perhaps intimidated. But on the other hand, I can't think of a better way of getting noticed than being at the front of the hall, delivering an educational talk. And Hillary's a great example of someone that's noticed us as a result of you doing exactly that.
I think you need to do that kind of introductory talk. I think that it's helpful to have a worksheet so they can take it away and do something themselves, or have some resources to look at, and then kind of giving them those next steps. I definitely think it's much more of a soft sell than a hard sell. You know, we're not out there to just get bodies, so to speak. But and then the other thing I think is really important, and I've pointed this out to a number of people, is we have so much that's in front of our paywall, whether that's things that we've live streamed and then recorded. You know, Helen Osborne's talk was excellent. Some of the stuff on the medical was really good, the DNA. We provide this value add, so, you know, not only to our guild members but also to the public, and it's part of the mission of being a charitable organization and actually following through on that. So I think that that's really good. And I tell everyone, you know, I didn't register my surname for 4 years. I didn't feel the need to. Nobody was going to jump in there and grab Keo, but I also was trying to learn what was going on. And 25% of our members don't register a surname, and they remain in the guild. They might be working on their one name study, but they don't feel the need to do that. And so I think there's a real interest now, and I think that we're kind of riding a wave because of what Family Search is doing, as well as Ancestry, on including the surname information, and we just need to have an even more close alliance with those groups, and I think Family Search is an excellent job. If you get a chance to attend one of those demo theaters and walk through that, it was actually kind of fun. They opened the first one in Salt Lake City. There's going to be a smaller one in Seattle, but they're going to be in other places and other countries as well.
Can I just say one thing? When I knew about the guild years ago, because I've been doing my genealogy for quite a while, I always had the feeling that it was, you had to have a surname that you wanted to study before you joined, and maybe that's the opinion that a lot of people have got. So maybe there's a need to get out to people more that, you know, there's more to the guild than just looking at one surname. You know, join the guild, see what's going on, and then consider it. Because I mean, I went to sort of national family history things and that, and I'd looked at things from the guild before, but I thought, oh well, I'm not in a position to do just a one name study, so I wasn't interested. And it was only really like attending your talk and I'm familiar with a few other people that have been one name studiers that I realised that it was probably worth joining, even if I didn't have a one name study. So maybe that's an important thing to look at.
I do think that there's a huge... Go ahead.
Right, I was going to say the guild, as far as I'm concerned, is the only family history society that you really have to join, because I find often your research is not just focused in one area, it's all sorts of areas, and any answer that you want answered, or any question you want answered, there's always someone in the guild who can answer it. So if your research suddenly find yourself in Ireland or in Scotland or in Bulgaria or wherever in the world, there's always going to be someone in the guild who's got an answer to the question and who knows about the resources in that place. And I also think we've got a much younger demographic in the guild than in family history societies. I did a talk the other night to a local family history society. The average attendee was probably well over 70, whereas we get a much younger age range, I think, within the guild members. Certainly within the active guild membership. Anyway, it's a very wide range in the guild. I think a much wider range than you get with any other society.
And I always tell people that I think the best resource that we have is the 2,700 members, because I will contact someone in Ireland or someone in Australia and say, I have no clue where I should be starting out here, or do you even have these kinds of records? You know, I tell people to go onto Family Search or go to Januki or whatever, depending on the areas that they're studying. But people will respond, and I get something every week in my email that somebody's seen an obituary or a newspaper article, or, you know, like I said, the prison records, the convict records in Australia, which have a number of my surname in them. You know, but they're always willing to tell you, I've seen something, and send it to you. And so I think it's a real good interaction. And I think the wiki is excellent. You know, you have to search to find it, but there is a lot of information on the technology, methodology, and the record sets in various countries. It's very, very helpful.
I tend to disagree.
I know you do, John. What do you disagree?
Well, you know, either we don't call ourselves the Guild of One Name Studies, or we are the Guild of One Name Studies. When I joined the Guild in 1984, it was obligatory to be doing a one name study and register a name. I don't know where where that was released. You know, where it changed. I mean, well, I love the idea as being the International Family History Society. That's great, but then it's a different matter entirely.
Well, we are studying surnames, and most people, I also tell everyone this, everyone's doing a one-name study. You might be doing a small one, just the ones you're related to, but you are studying that surname. And I think that when some changes were made about the size of the study, or where you're at now and where you're going to be, whether you register or not, that is up to the person. You can get a lot from this organization, and you can give a lot to this organization, and many people do who do not have a registered surname. One example, Stephen Archer. I have been putting together that using the surname atlas to send out information to the people who attended my Roots Tech presentation about their surname, giving them that map, giving them the information. I wrote to him specifically to make sure that I had written permission from him to share that 2-page, and he couldn't have been nicer. And I noticed that he didn't have a registered surname. Should he not be in the guild? No, that would be such a waste of an asset. You know, he's a wonderful person, and he's doing an amazing thing for people who do have specific surnames they're researching. So I think we need to be less dogmatic on that, and I think the vast majority of people are.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Hillary's picked up on something that has maybe been a historic view. I know when I joined back in 2004, I think most of us did our hobby in isolation of everybody else. And to that effect, you look at the printed materials about the organisation and the kind of things that you might need to do or might need to have before you can join. I think there were wording like substantive. You must have a substantial amount of surname material, but in reality, you don't need anything. The only thing you need to do is to respond to queries. If you don't get any, then you can't be fired. And I think we have reached out to fellow prospective members who subsequently join, largely through meeting friendly faces and chatting about a topic of mutual interest. And folks think, you know, what the hell? Okay, I'll give it a go. If it's not for me, then I shall leave. You know, the wording and the documented presence on the web has been softened and tailored to be less intimidating to casual visitors to the site.
And I'm glad it was softened, because I never would have joined if it hadn't been.
That's fine so far as it goes, but then the name is misleading and also off-putting to the general public at large.
No, in our constitution it says that it's open to membership to anyone with an interest in one-name studies. It doesn't say you have to be doing a one-name study. That's enshrined in our constitution. So you can have an interest, you don't have to be without actively being doing one.
Mhm.
And also, if you've got a new one name study, if you set up a profile page, you can actually define on your profile page where you've got to in the study, and you can just outline the resources that you've covered so far, so that people don't waste their time writing to you if you haven't covered an area that they're interested in.
And they can also offer to help you. And I have had someone do that, say, I see you're not in this country yet. You know, I have some information, I'd be happy to help. And, you know, you want to reel those people in. And I think when I think of Guild, I think of a group of people who have an interest and they're trying to improve their skills. I mean, that's what artisans did with the Guild. You know, you started out, you could be in the Guild, but you might have just been, you know, the starter mason, and you work your way up. And I think that that's how we want to think about this, is that we're all trying to improve our skills. There have been some people who have been in the Guild for a very long time and are very helpful. There are some people who've been in the Guild for a very long time and I've never heard a word from them. There are some people in the Guild who probably don't even get a chance to work on their study because of all the volunteer work they do for the Guild. I certainly want to encourage everyone to, you know, join in, help out, view this as, and it's what I think it is, a real interesting group of people who are working individually at whatever stage they're at. And you know, I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to be in the group, and you do not have to be spending 10 hours a day toiling on a one-name study or reconstructing families. You know, whatever approach you take is the one that works for you. I do think there are better practices and some best practices. You want to help people not reinvent the wheel, but I'm not a big believer in saying if you don't follow every single rule, you know, you're out the door and you don't even know what the rules are.
I think there is still a certain amount of snobbery from the old days when it was actually very, very difficult to collect the data, and then you've got, you know, the very early members who had to go to the Family Record Centre and get all the big books down and try and get all their BMDs from those printed registers. Whereas, of course, now what took, you know, it would take them weeks and weeks to do that, and I don't know how many trips to London. Now you can just do that in half an hour on free BMD. But I think there's this sort of certain view from the old guard, if you like, that if you didn't do it the old-fashioned way, you know, and put in all that hard work, it's not the same thing.
That's a bit hard, Debbie.
Well, I think it's
That's
kind
a
of
bit
humorous.
foolish, you know.
No,
I'm one of those old fogies, you know.
well, but the
And as
funny
you're
thing
saying,
is,
all the people over 70 years old, I'm over 70 years old.
Well, you're someone who's saying we shouldn't be joining the Guild without a one-name study.
I think this is a little bit how law and medicine and certainly other fields are. You talk to somebody who says, I had to kill myself to make partner and, you know, work 14-hour days, or, you know, during my residency I had to do all this, and we think it's terrible when we're going through it. However, when you make partner, or you are that physician who's on staff, you want every other resident and every other associate to do the same thing you had to do. So there's this view of lightening that up a little bit for, you know, life quality. And I think we have done that in the Guild in the last couple of years as well. But I will also say, I find some of the most delightful people. There's one in the USA West. She's our oldest member in terms of age, and she is right on the ball, and she's telling me about the new record set. So, and I found this also at the Family History Library. The 93-year-old was the one who showed me the newest scanner there, and she knew exactly how to use it because she'd figured it out. So it's not age sometimes, it's attitude.
Yes, very true.
I went to the local history society near me for the first time last weekend, and I wanted to see what they were doing before I joined. And I think I was probably the youngest person there, but the speaker didn't turn up, or there was a problem with the talk or whatever. So it was something else. And one person stood up and talked about one of her families. And when I was speaking to her afterwards, she is one of the people that has recently joined the guild. So it was nice to see that there was somebody, and there's somebody that could just stand up and do something. So I'm certainly going to investigate, because I know when I came over to the US, they were talking about sort of getting people more involved and getting the younger people involved. And I'm thinking, if those of us that have the skills to use the technology are not getting out there and contributing to these local societies, they're never going to move forward with the technology and things to be able to use it. And a lot of the problems may be due to venues where they have to hold the meetings as much as anything. That's my only thought, is that where they had the meeting that I went to, I doubt that they would have the internet access that to be able to do things, whereas we've got a big geographical area to cover in the north of Wales. There's, people do live in some quite disparate places, and the roads are not always that great to get people around, and it's a pity that we can't use the technology a bit more.
And I will say that's why I had originally worked with a couple other people to set up the Legacy Virtual Users Group. I was interested in learning more about Legacy, but I'm never in one place, you know, at that specific day each month that a local group might have their meeting, or they might be covering something I've already heard on the other side of the country. And so we wanted to set something up that not only people who travel a lot, or people's work schedule, or maybe it's their health concerns or where they're located. And we have about, I want to say, 1066 sticks in my mind for historical reasons, as well as the number I think we have right now. You know, but we've had a real good influx of people, and I think people are interested and happy to attend these things or watch them recorded afterwards to learn more. And we need to get out there. We also want to support those local groups, because they have been doing the heavy lifting, and I always tell people there is so much more that is not online. You know, don't think that you're going to find everything online, because you're not. And so it's a good combination of both. And you know, whether it's free, whether there's a cost to it, you need to determine your own budget. But there's a lot available out there, and we need to do a combination of things.
Yeah, and I want to just mention that Tessa is as well known at my genealogy society for legacy users as she is for the guild, because we have a users group, and they often use Tessa's videos and go over them point by point during their meetings. So it's quite funny, you know, how things like that happen. And I just want to reiterate what Hillary brought up, is that again and again, this networking thing and the giving opportunities for like-minded people to get together and just work together. Not for just, oh, hi, how are you doing, you know, whatever. At our DNA interest group, we alternate speakers with what we call working groups. And on the nights that we don't have speakers, we all just gather in little groups and help each other. And everybody knows something. You know, it's just like saying, you know, everybody has interesting ancestors if you look, you know, you look enough. And we find people that know how to use Ancestry really well, the DNA part of it, and you know, somebody else knows how to use 23andMe or whatever. And luckily, we hold our meetings in a community room of the local library, so we have internet access, and it's not always the best, but we can get on the internet, so we can help people set their things up and show them how to use the different tools and that. And they tell me, the feedback I get from our members is that they really like that. You know, I get this, when are we going to have another work group? You know, so it's really important. And I think at the seminars, it's important to have that kind of thing available. You know.
Yeah, I mean, to Hillary's point, some of the seminars are held in what I would call church halls, and they just don't have any internet access, or the internet access is not up to much. What we do when we go to those venues, though, is we record the proceedings and then post them up on YouTube afterwards. So you can't quite watch the thing live, but it doesn't necessarily detract from the ability to attend one of these seminars. What some folks are beginning to do is to dip their toe, Kathleen, into calling upon other guild members remotely and saying, can you spare an hour, join us for ... Our local family history society are having a gathering. Would you please join us remotely and give us a talk on ... whatever it is. And some folks are beginning to wheel out their laptops, hook the laptop to a projector, plug in a set of speakers, and inviting remote participants to deliver a remote talk. A lot of that depends on the venue that you use and whether or not it's up to carrying live video as such. But this whole Hangout thing for the guild started as a number of members scattered all around the world wanting to get together and not necessarily conduct their one-name studies in isolation. It's not that we collaborate openly on each other's studies. Now, some folks do, but we do share tools, techniques, methods, news sources, and just the pros and cons of why we do our own one-name studies in a certain way, and perhaps how we wished we hadn't if we were to start again.
All right, do we have any more comments? Because I think we've been going, it's going to be about, I will say 10 o'clock, but who knows what time it is where you are. It's 10 o'clock on the West Coast. So we've been going about an hour and a half, which is probably pretty good. So any other comments? If you have any suggestions for what you would like at this first USA seminar, while we're finishing up the schedule, and it might be something that we do the following year. We're just starting out this one. It's going to be for both guild members and non-guild members, because the New England Historic Genealogical Society is going to be involved in having their members attend as well. So hopefully we're going to have some new members from the New England area. But I think it's a real good mix of talking about one-name studies and talking about records, and then leaving a lot of time open for workshops or research on in the afternoons. So would love to hear what you think, and we will go from there.
I have
and
just
welcome,
one more
Hillary.
thing to
I'm just
say.
so glad that you joined us. All right, Kathleen.
Hello, Ed.
Hi, sorry about that.
Okay, you didn't speak at all, so we
No. I had it on mute. It's a little bit of a noisy background here. I'm hoping it's no kids screaming or anything right now. But yeah, no, I was just appreciating what everyone was talking about. It's good stuff.
Great.
Can I just ask if they're going to have everything recorded from the one that you're going to be having over there?
Only if we bring Bob over, and maybe that's what we'll have to do. Because he knows how to do all of that.
I would have thought that it might be possible to find Buttonhole, a member who has one of these action cams, because it might be nice just for the outsiders, no one who's joined the guild yet but might be thinking about it, to get a sense of the atmosphere. And if someone's wearing a head cam and sort of walks around for 5 minutes with members' consent, obviously, then it might be a nice thing. Because I wouldn't have minded that before I went to my first conference earlier this year. I wouldn't have minded to get an idea of what it was like.
And that might be, I don't know that we're in a position to do the recording of the actual talks, but that might be a very good idea to do a couple interviews or chat it up or do a virtual tour of the facility that we are at. I like that idea, Ed. Great.
And I think, I apologize if I'm crediting you wrongly, Debbie, with this, but I think it was Debbie pointing out this to me at one of the last seminars that I was at, that her view was we should take a camera, not backstage, so to speak, but along the area where guild members take their stuff for display purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a way of kind of walking around with a remote cam.
That wasn't my idea. I don't know who that was.
Okay, I apologise then. Someone did suggest it to me.
Well, it's what Mert does at conferences. Richard Erickson, she does ambush cam, and that's all on YouTube.
Right.
You can go
And
and see examples of it.
Okay, and the thing that you need to keep in mind, John, because you've mentioned this a couple times and I understand that is, Dear Mert, this is somewhat, she does it on a volunteer basis, but this is her business in one sense. You know, she does this 24/7. Most
That's
of
a
the
lot.
people, well, and I've met her now in person because I was at Roots Tech. She had us all to dinner, but she taught before, and she's very savvy on all the technology, and she has Russ to help her, and they are doing Hangouts almost every single day. It's a little bit different when you do them once a month. It's a little bit different when you do that on a totally volunteer basis, and you're trying to find the button each time. And so it's one of those things that we're working on, but whether it's equipment or anything else, that's going to be an investment that the guild makes and that, you know, the membership
Yeah.
needs to make as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, the advice is there. Russ is the guy that does, Russ Worthington. He's a member of the guild. He can
Right,
help
but
you with
John,
advice and
Russ isn't going to be showing up necessarily at a conference we're at and working it.
oh, sure, no, but I mean,
this
it's not
view.
impossible.
Right, but it's also this view that some people think, well, you can certainly get a member to do it. It's actually, having worked with getting volunteers, it's not as easy as you would think.
Oh, I know that.
For the DNA lectures, Morris recorded all of those on his laptop, on a Mac laptop, and it was just an app that he got for the laptop. So that, I mean, I would have thought that sort of thing probably should be fairly easy to do. That's just having the sound, the audio, and the slides running together. And in fact, I had to re-record one of my talks, and I just did it on my computer, just pressed within PowerPoint, record slideshow, and the whole thing just came out there and then. And I would imagine you could just do that on the day as well.
Right, and that's probably a good idea, that if we have, you know, at least two of them, the guild ones that we can record. I don't know what we could do necessarily about the NEHGS speakers, but we could have some of those available after the fact, and that would be useful. Some very good ideas here. Thanks. Anything else? All right, I think we're done. Thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you all again next month. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. If you want to stay in the room for a few minutes and tell me what your ideas are offline, that's fine too.